We're about to unleash chaos. The gates of hell are opening. I want control of the Panama Canal and Greenland. As for Canada, it's an American state in our eyes. We no longer recognize the Human Rights Council, and the International Criminal Court has already been sanctioned. Donald Trump is back, and chaos is his weapon of choice. His return to the White House in 2025 set the stage for an era of disruption. Swift executive orders, bombastic statements, and a world teetering on uncertainty. Fear and fascination collide as the fiery-haired leader redefines global power, leaving allies and enemies scrambling. Throughout history, some leaders have thrived on disruption, using shock and unpredictability as political tools. Trump is a master of this game, embracing a strategy where disorder paves the way for dominance. He overwhelms opponents, media, and institutions with a relentless torrent of decisions and provocations, a method often referred to as flooding the zone. Before politics, Trump built his empire in business and media, wielding his celebrity status like a weapon. His 2016 campaign foreshadowed what was to come: unfiltered rhetoric, relentless attacks, and a media blitz that left rivals floundering. He didn't just enter politics, he bulldozed through it. Re-elected in 2025, with backing from billionaire Elon Musk, Trump wasted no time unleashing a cascade of executive orders and high-stakes pronouncements. The sheer speed of his decisions kept opponents in a perpetual state of reaction. His advisors called it flooding the zone. Trump himself had a simpler term for it: FOFO. When asked about his approach, he posted a single image on social media, himself in a pinstripe suit, wearing a smirk and a hat, straight out of a 1920s gangster flick. Donald Trump's return to the White House wasn't just another political shift. It was a global shockwave. There was no grace period, no moment for the world to process what had just happened. From day one, he set his strategy in motion, a relentless barrage of executive orders, incendiary statements, and high-stakes threats. His advisors had a name for it: flooding the zone. The goal: overwhelm opponents so completely that they could barely react before the next political bombshell dropped. One of the first detonations, Canada, a nation known for its politeness, suddenly found itself at the center of Trump's storm. In a single Truth Social post, he sent shockwaves across North America. A map of the U.S., now expanded to include Canada, captioned with just 2 words: "Oh Canada." At first, some dismissed it as trolling. But then came the real kicker. Trump openly floated the idea of using economic pressure to force Canada into a merger with the U.S., treating an entire country like a real estate acquisition. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau responded swiftly, declaring that Canada was not for sale. But behind closed doors, Canadian officials weren't just laughing it off. Trump's unpredictability was a legitimate concern. What kind of economic leverage was he planning to use? And it wasn't just Canada. The global economy braced for impact as Trump reignited trade wars with China, the European Union, and even U.S. allies. New tariffs came down like a hammer, mirroring the aggressive economic tactics of his first term. Economists warned of recession, market instability, and international retaliation. Trump, he saw it all as a game of pressure and dominance. Push hard enough, and eventually, the other side folds. The world had been here before, but this time, the stakes were even higher. Trump had long wielded tariffs like a battering ram, using economic pressure as both a bargaining chip and a political weapon. During his first term, he ignited a trade war with China, sending shockwaves through global markets. Now, back in power, he escalated even further, slapping tariffs as high as 35% on select Chinese imports. Beijing didn't take the hit quietly. In response, Chinese officials threatened to cut off critical supply chains, setting the stage for yet another high-stakes economic standoff. For Trump, this wasn't just policy. It was a fight he thrived on. While tensions boiled with China, pressure mounted on Canada and Europe. But Trump had his eye on an even more unexpected prize: Greenland. The massive Arctic island, still under Danish control, once again captured his interest. He spoke openly about America's missed opportunity in not acquiring it, hinting that this mistake could still be corrected. This wasn't just idle talk. Reports surfaced that Trump's inner circle was actively exploring ways to pressure Denmark into reconsidering. Economic sanctions were floated as a possibility, alongside a more unorthodox strategy, a media campaign aimed at convincing the people of Greenland to embrace the idea of becoming part of the United States. Denmark was outraged. To them, this was nothing short of political interference, a blatant challenge to their sovereignty. But Trump's ambitions didn't stop there. As Europe scrambled to respond, NATO itself found its foundations shaken. Trump had never been a fan of the alliance, seeing it as a drain on U.S. resources. Now he was making moves that signaled something even more extreme, a potential reduction in America's military commitments. Allies were left in a state of unease. Was this the unraveling of the world's most powerful military pact? If the U.S. pulled back, what would become of European security? One thing was certain: Trump's threats were never just talk. While the world fixated on Trump's moves against Canada, China, and NATO, another region was being pulled into the storm: Latin America. Trump turned his attention south, issuing direct threats against the Panama Canal, accusing the small nation of overcharging American ships. Then came the real bombshell. He hinted that the U.S. might reclaim control of the canal, even suggesting force could be an option. Mexico wasn't spared either. Trump imposed new tariffs under the guise of tackling immigration, brushing aside previous agreements and leaving Mexico's leadership scrambling. One by one, Latin American nations were being backed into a corner, comply with Washington's demands, or face severe consequences. This wasn't just economic warfare. It was a declaration of dominance. Trump made it clear: the days of diplomatic restraint were over. Colombia became the next target. After refusing to comply with U.S. deportation policies, it faced immediate sanctions. The message was simple: resisting Washington's influence was no longer an option. The region seemed on the verge of returning to an era where U.S. pressure dictated Latin American policy, and defiance came at a steep price. But Latin America wasn't the only front in this new power struggle. The real battle was brewing with China. Without hesitation, Trump slapped fresh tariffs on Chinese imports, setting off a chain reaction. Beijing retaliated with its own economic countermeasures, dragging the world closer to the brink of a full-scale financial crisis. Markets trembled, global leaders urged caution, but Trump, he doubled down, gambling that China's economy would crack before the U.S. felt the pain. It was a high-stakes showdown, with no sign of either side backing down. Even as he waged economic and political battles, Trump remained committed to dismantling international institutions. Wasting no time, he renewed his assault on the International Criminal Court, signing an executive order to sanction judges who had issued arrest warrants for Israeli officials over Gaza. He also withdrew from the UN Human Rights Council, again, and cut off funding to UNRWA, moves widely seen as part of his broader effort to undermine the international system and reshape it to fit his vision. But perhaps his most dangerous move was a direct intervention in the Gaza conflict. Trump issued a cryptic warning to Hamas, threatening hell if all prisoners were not released. The ambiguity of his words sent shockwaves through the region. Was he referring to prisoners already set for release or all prisoners? Even Israel's government was caught off guard. Was Trump using the threat as a negotiating tool, or was he deliberately trying to derail peace efforts and reignite the conflict? No one could say for certain, but the consequences of his words were undeniable. Meanwhile, on the global stage, Trump made another sweeping move, freezing all humanitarian and foreign aid. The world was left in confusion. Would aid resume, or had Trump just cut it off indefinitely? As weeks passed, the uncertainty deepened. In just a short time since returning to power, Trump had left an undeniable mark on the world stage. Threatening Canada, igniting a new trade war, undermining NATO, confronting China, and now redrawing the Middle East map. It was clear that he was racing to reshape the global order before anyone could stop him. Each move, whether a statement, a threat, or a signature on an executive order, was part of a larger plan to remake the world, starting with the United States. Trump, who once cast aside the human rights principles that Washington had long championed in wars across the globe, now seems determined to reshape the world order on his own terms. At his core, he operates like a businessman, viewing global affairs as a series of transactions. If something doesn't offer a clear return on investment, he simply won't engage. But this time, he's not acting alone. Back in the White House, Trump reconnects with old allies like Putin and Netanyahu, aligning their interests to end the conflicts that threaten them while shifting the military balance in Europe and the Middle East. His message to the world: America is great again, exactly as he promised. Yet, his vision comes at a steep cost. His relentless actions aren't just shaking up the existing world order. They're tearing it apart and replacing it with a system driven solely by force and financial pressure. And that raises the biggest question of all. Where is Trump leading the world? Is this chaos just the opening act of a much larger, carefully orchestrated plan? Or has he unleashed something that even he can't control? One thing is certain: the world after Trump's return will look nothing like the world before it.